What's up guys, today I'll be comparing the Gamma 405, 505, and the Riley Newman 206 signature paddle. So these are three of Gamma's latest and highest end paddles, but after testing, was there really that much of a difference? Did you guys know that 82% of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoyed this content, make sure to click the subscribe button to see more content just like this. All right, so before we go any further, I just want to say thanks to Just Paddles for sending these over for me to make this video. If you guys plan to pick one of these up, you can use my affiliate link down in the description, and that just helps support the channel. All right, starting off with the specs, they are very similar from the outside. The 505 and 206 are both $179.99, while the 405 can be purchased for $139.99. They are all an elongated face with a 5.25-inch handle length and a 4.25-inch grip circumference, and all of them are octagon handles. Though they aren't a very nice octagon handle, if I'm gonna be honest. The angles aren't very sharp, and sometimes it feels like that semi-oval grip that a lot of paddles use. The 505 and 206 are both 16mm, and they are using the same poly new core, while the 405 is a 13mm and uses what Gamma calls their Sensa core technology. What's interesting is Gamma is oddly vague about the differences between these cores. They throw in a lot of the usual marketing jargon you expect from paddle companies, but after digging deeper, it appears that any paddle that has their Sensa core is just a 13mm paddle, and anything that has the new core is just a 16mm paddle. Other than that, they are both polycore paddles, and Gamma claims that the cell size of each honeycomb is slightly larger on the new core. Now, what that actually translates to in the real world, I don't know. The final difference is that the Riley Newman 206 has a textured composite face, while the 405 and 505 are using a textured graphite face. But to the touch with your hand, these all feel like nearly identical surfaces, except that the 405 might feel just slightly grittier than the others. The weights of the 405 and 505 come in at an average of 7.6 ounces, and the 206 is around 8. Though, with that being said, the weights of mine were a bit off. The 405 came in at 7.6 ounces, and then the 505 at 8.1 ounce, and the 206 at 7.8. So the 206 and 505 had flipped weights for what I would expect, so just be aware that there is quite a variance with the weights, just like with most paddles. So the main differences between these paddles are paddle thickness, the face surface, and the weights. Almost everything else is completely identical. When it comes to spin, none of these performed very well. The Gamma 405 was 1,075 RPM, the Gamma 505 was 1,200 RPM, and the Riley Newman 206 was 1,320 RPM. This is about what I would expect from one of these textured composite or textured graphite surfaces. So if spin is something that matters to you a lot, then none of these perform particularly well, but it does seem that the 206 was a standout and was hitting about that average spin tier. For control, I would say all of them are on the poppier side of paddles. I'm very used to carbon face paddles at this point, which all tend to be very soft and great for control. I would say that the 505 comes first for control, followed by the 206 and then the 405. Since the 405 is a 13mm core, that should naturally have more pop than the others. The difference in control for the 505 and 206 ultimately comes down to the composite face versus the graphite. The 206 with the composite face just feels a bit more stiff, so the ball hops off of it quite quickly, which can give you some good power and pop, but may come at the expense of some control. Overall, no real issues dinking with any of them. I think the biggest struggle I had with all of them was resetting. I'm just so used to carbon fiber paddles absorbing a lot of energy, so going to these felt harder to get my resets in at the right height and depth. They have a lot more pop than a carbon fiber face paddle. For the power category, you can pretty much flip those rankings in reverse. I would say the 405 has the most power, followed by the 206, and then finally the 505. I think the 405 and 206 are actually quite close despite the different thicknesses. For all of these paddles, I did enjoy them for my serves. The added pop really gives my serve some extra speed, which feels great. The only thing I will say is that not having the extra spin was annoying, because for my serve, I'm used to using a lot of topspin to keep the ball in, and I just couldn't generate the same spin with these as I can with the Ben John's Hyperion CFS. Shots like counter punching, putaways, or drive all felt great to me though. For hand speed, this is where the additional weight plays a bigger role. The 405 was definitely the lightest and felt the fastest at the net. It helps that the paddle is more headlight than the other two. At the net, it felt really easy to maneuver and hit the shots I wanted. The 206 and 505 also felt fine at the net, but there's really nothing special to note. One difference I will mention is that because of the 405 feeling a bit more hollow and light, I did notice that mishits felt slightly worse or clunky, whereas the 505 and 206, the mishit didn't feel good, but it felt more solid overall. It felt like the 405 when hit off center was trying to twist in my hand. The 505 and 206 are very dense feeling paddles, while the 405 feels a bit more hollow in comparison, maybe a little cheaper as you hit. One thing I did observe is that after using all three of these, I was actually starting to get tennis elbow. I've never had this with any other paddle until I started using these. They have a noticeable amount of vibration to the arm compared to something like the Warrior, Electrum Model E, or the Ben Johns Hyperion CFS. So just as a warning, if you struggle with tennis elbow, these might make it worse. Sweet spot on all three of these felt about average to me. It didn't feel particularly small, and it also didn't feel large. So I don't really have a lot to comment about these, except that they feel normal. While all three of these have not been put through extreme testing, the 505 was used a lot. I had a local 5.0 friend who loves this paddle and used mine for about a month for all of his practicing, drilling, and tournaments, and it held up perfectly. I imagine the scenario would be the same for the 206 since they are nearly identical paddles. The face is scratched a bit, but after a month of very heavy use, this is doing way better than a lot of paddles out there. The 405 doesn't show any signs of wear yet, but just by it being thinner, it does feel slightly cheaper than the other two. Whether that translates to poor durability or not remains to be seen. One thing I want to talk about is the marketing of these paddles, because to me it's a bit confusing. The way I see it right now is that the 405 is mostly just a 13mm version of the 505 because they're the same specs otherwise. The only difference is the Sensa core versus the new core, but they're so vague about what those differences even are. What confuses me is that the 405 is noticeably cheaper than the 505, so if it truly is just the difference of thickness, I don't understand why the 405 is so much cheaper. Now, when you compare the 505 and 206, these are also incredibly similar. The specs are literally identical except for the face material that they are using. The 206 definitely has a stiffer face, which makes counterpunching and putaways pack a bigger punch, and the 505 is geared a little bit more towards control, but beyond that, I really don't see any big differences. They do play slightly differently, but I don't understand why they made the differences so small. Generally, you have someone like Electrum who has the Model E, which is their thicker and elongated version, while the Electrum Pro is 13mm and more of a wide body shape. At the very least, I would have expected them to give the 505 or 206 a longer handle, something that sets these apart more. Not to mention, when you look at the 206 and 505, the color schemes are very similar. So if you released the Riley Newman 206 signature paddle, what was even the point of doing the 505 with it being nearly identical minus the face material? So overall, the 505 was my favorite of the three. I like to have a paddle that I can reset and have good control with, and this one did that best for me. With that being said, when I compare it to my primary paddle, the Ben Johns Hyperion CFS, the control was noticeably less to me. So even though the 505 was the one I enjoyed the most, I personally would not choose to use any of these three paddles. They just don't fit my playstyle. While these paddles were not bad by any means, I did feel that they were lacking in excitement. They're all very similar. They don't have any interesting technology like the new carbon fiber faces, and the marketing of these paddles is just confusing. So to me, these aren't really a huge recommendation. If you're someone who likes Gamma, then there's a good chance you're gonna like these paddles, but if you're debating these versus something like the Ben Johns Hyperion and Electrum, maybe even Engage or quite a few other paddles on the market, I'm really not sure I would recommend these. But if you want, make sure to go demo them before you give it a purchase and let me know down below what you think of them. But there you guys go. Those are my thoughts on these paddles. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to click the like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.